Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of 52 Must See Movies and Why They Matter. Once again, I'm joined by my friend Stephen Billings.
Hello, how are you guys doing? Welcome to the 52 must-see movies. We're
We
going to talk about every movie on this one episode. Just kidding.
Yeah, I that would be a heck of a feat. We are back here and we are getting down to it. And this week we are discussing a film that I had never seen before and Steven had never seen before. And I guess that's why we had put it off for so long, probably subconsciously going through all the movies that we're more familiar with. And that is Leave Her to Heaven, which is directed by John M Stahl, came out in 1945. And this is a Technicolor film, but it's also a Technicolor film noir, as they categorize it. In this book here, they categorize it, as well as, I guess, other film historians categorize it as well. This book here is put out by Turner Classic Movies. It was written by Jeremy Arnold, with a foreword by the late, great Robert Osborne. And this is where we've been getting all of these films from. This is a book I know many cinephiles have, including myself and several friends, and it's a great book. And while it says it's 52 essential movies, we all know that there are more than just 52 essential movies. Movies have been around for a very long time. But getting down to it, Leave Her to Heaven is a great film, in my opinion. It was a film that was surprisingly great to me. Like I said, I hadn't seen it before. So I went into it knowing very little about it. This film does star Gene Tierney and Cornel Wilde. Gene Tierney is more famously known for the film she did right before this film came out in Laura in 1944, directed by Otto Preminger. And that is considered one of the greatest film noirs of all time. And she's considered one of the greatest femme fatale actresses of all time. And she is phenomenal in this movie. For those of you not aware of this series, we are going to get all deep into spoilerish territory, so be forewarned about that. And I have to say, wow, there's a lot of you can't discuss this movie without going into the spoilers, because this film is a mixture of Douglas Sirk melodrama and then Alfred Hitchcock film, in my opinion. Coincidentally, the director of this film, John M. Stahl, did a film called The Magnificent Obsession in 1934, a film that Douglas Sirk would then remake in the 1950s as a Douglas Sirk melodrama. So he's taking a lot of influence from this director and his films, and he would then adapt those elements later in his films. But man, what a film. Stephen, what are your general impressions of this wowzers of a film?
Yes, like you, first time watching and getting into it, I was like, wow, okay. He meets this girl, it seems like there's kind of a romance going on here. And then when the story kind of takes its turn and you start to realize what's going on, you start to really see why it's essential and why it's inspired a lot of films in the future. But yeah, this movie, I thought structurally it was fantastic. The screenplay, great. Gina Tierney.
Yeah, Gene Tierney. That's the way I pronounce it.
Yeah, she was fantastic. I think she got nominated for this role too. Supporting actress, pretty sure.
I believe she was nominated for best actress in a leading role.
Yep.
And the movie also did win best cinematography as well. She didn't win for her role, but she was nominated.
Yeah, she's fantastic, man. I don't want to get into it yet. I want us to go.
I'll get into it. We'll start off right away. Yeah, we'll start off here. Basically, this movie starts off and it's centered around the relationship between Gene Tierney's character of Ellen Barrett, and Richard Harland, who's portrayed by Cornel Wilde. They meet on like this ranch in New Mexico, and they have kind of this very quick kind of whirlwind romantic relationship. It's kind of one of those like love at first sight, chemistry at first sight. They just start talking, and there's this instant connection with one another. It turns out that I believe they have a common friend in common, so they're both staying in like the same place, all kind of centered around each other in this ranch in New Mexico, and that's where we get to see them connect for the first time, and they connect on a very personal level. He she likes to, she's kind of a loner. She likes to, there were some segments early on where she would take a horse and ride out into kind of the country and be alone for like hours and hours at end. And he would get very concerned about that, and he would go and find her, and they would have great like romantic moments and talks and whatnot. And then they decide to get married rather abruptly. It's very interesting, Stephen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, it all happens so fast. It really is like the first 15 to 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
But you get a really quick through before that time of the getting married, which we'll get to that particular moment in a second. But before that, first of all, we kind of realize that this whole retreat to this place is also kind of a reason to scatter the ashes of their recently deceased father. Her father has died, and she was really close with her father. And she even, to the point, which kind of makes you look back at it later of why she falls for this guy, is that she said that he looks very much like her father when he was younger. So it's that whole thing of like women that fall for men that are like their dads kind of thing. Like, and so, there's hints, small hits, which make, this is why I say the script is so great, that it drops hints of what's to come early on in the story when you look back. But yeah, basically, there's an ex that comes into the picture that, that is a lawyer and comes in and says, I still love you and blah, blah, blah. But then on the spot, she says, no, this is my fiance.
Yeah.
Right. Like he doesn't even know what's going on. He's like, yeah.
Yeah. And her, I guess, ex-fiance, ex-boyfriend is portrayed by Vincent Price, who was also played a love interest in the movie Laura that we just talked about. So there's an interesting connection there. And it's always great to see the great Vincent Price in any film. And he is someone who's running for political office. He's running for a DA, which is a district attorney, and he tried to tell her like, could you postpone this till after the election, because it would look bad for him if he got dumped, mid campaign. And he's very spiteful when
like high school.
Yeah, very much so. And he's a little bit spiteful about that situation, and that kind of comes up later on in the movie. But we'll get to that. And he kind of he only pops in like twice in the movie, but he pops in here.
Really.
And she says that, like Stephen mentioned, like, oh yeah, I'm already engaged to someone else. I met someone else, being the Richard Harlan character, who's a kind of a famous writer. And going back a little bit, the way they met is that she is reading his book on the train into town, and he tries to use one of the lines in the movie to kind of woo her or flirt with her, and then she calls him out on it, not realizing that he is the author. And there's a lot of playful stuff between the two early on in this movie. Like we said, this is within like the first 20 minutes of the movie. It's very short first act. And where the first act kind of, I guess, comes to a close and the second act really starts is like we said, when they get married rather quickly. And then they go and visit Richard's brother, who is he's a younger kid, probably a teenager, and he has a physical handicap. And I don't believe they ever mention specifically medically what's wrong with him. I kind of assumed it's polio, consider the time that they are living in. And I believe this is before the polio vaccine. I'd have to check all that stuff up. But he has some type of physical handicap where his legs aren't functioning properly. He has to be in a wheelchair. He has to walk on crutches, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a very nice, like homely, sweet story. about this guy meets this woman, and it's all very nice and romantic. She's like perfect, she's beautiful, she's smart. She doesn't she doesn't mind taking care of the handicapped brother. She loves him. It's big happy family.
She wants to cook. She wants to take care of him.
Yeah,
she
it's
really
like the perfect world.
Yeah.
It's the perfect world for the time in which the film came out, the 1940s, and everything seems so great. And then the cracks start to show a little bit early on. That's what Stephen was getting at. This screenplay is so fantastic because it's very much holds its cards for the most part. This is something that Hitchcock did a lot. Hitchcock would have those famous second act twists, the third act twist, the twist at the end, but he would hold his cards very much close to the chest before he would reveal it, so that you couldn't quite see it coming.
Yeah,
and we don't see it coming.
Yeah, until we finally get to the scene with where she visits the doctor.
Yes, the doctor scene, and and you're wondering, like, why is she asking these types of questions? Why is she trying to make the doctor say something he didn't want to say? Basically, she was trying to get the doctor to say that Danny, the younger brother, is not fit enough to travel up to their I guess their summer home in Maine, or their home in Maine. He's not physically capable. He's not healthy enough. The doctor's like, no, he could do it. It'll probably be good for him to get out there and whatever, and not be stuck here and whatnot. But she's forcefully trying to get her way. And what we learn throughout the movie is that the Ellen character wants to get her way no matter what.
And once again, we do get that another hint of that earlier in the story, where Ellen is racing these kids in the water in the pond, and he's like, it looks like the kids are going to win. He's like, no, Ellen wins every time. She always wins.
Yes, and early on in the movie, we didn't touch on this, but there is a cousin character who gets mistaken for being Ellen's sister. The character's name is Ruth, and she's portrayed by Jean Crane. And there's an interesting relationship there between the cousin character and Ruth and the Richard character. It's very friendly, it's very mutual. They have a nice banter back and forth, but this leads to a lot of jealousy from the Ellen character a little bit early on, but then I think it definitely grows as the film goes on, as we'll discuss. So moving on, they end up going to that house in Maine, and yet again we have this picturesque scene of this family. They're living in this serene cabin by the water. I believe it's a river. It's all very nice. The brother's having a great time. He's swimming and going on the boat and all this kind of stuff. The Richard character is writing. He's working, and the Ellen character is fine. She's being, like I said, the perfect wife for that moment. And then things slowly get to change when there's a helper there. His name is Thorne, I believe, and this is a small scene where the Thorne character, when we find out the Thorne character moves from the house to, I believe, staying in the barn. It's a very small scene. It's very subtle, but it's yet again, it's dominoes falling. Things are moving. He moves to the barn, and then her family comes to visit. Her mother and her cousin come to visit. The Ruth character, who I believe by this point ends up being adopted by the mother. So she's technically an adopted sister at this point.
Yeah.
That's when things get interesting.
Yeah, she basically says she feels like she never gets time with him to herself. That it's crowded, even though they're like in the middle of nowhere. Like it's just keeps. I know.
Yeah, they're in the middle of nowhere, where with like the Danny and like the helper guy Thorne, the guy who works there and takes care of the physical labor of stuff. But what is interesting is one of the early scenes of them in there is they're lying in their separate beds, because the Hays Code, you can't have two married couples sleeping in the same bed. That's prohibited. And then and apparently they tried to get a little physical, sexually, as far as you can push it in the 1940s. And the kid is like in the next room, and he's like, "Hey, you guys up yet?" And the walls are so thin, like you could just talk through the walls. There's no privacy. And this kind of really irks the Ellen character. She really wants to get this guy alone with her, and only have him alone with her. And when the parents show up right away, or the parents, I mean, her family shows up right away, you see that she is pissed about it. She is mad. She just like storms off. She's very upset, and the Richard character brought them in to surprise her, thinking it was a good idea, not really being aware of who she is really. She does a great job of hiding herself for at least half of this movie, or at least hiding who she really is as a person, her worst intentions. And that's when the film really starts to turn the corner.
Yeah, yeah. You could play off a lot of things as insecurities and stuff like that at first, but then when this certain thing happens, you're like, okay, this woman's disturbed. Like she's very disturbed.
Yeah, there's a scene with where they're all sitting in the, I'm assuming, the parlor or the living room, and then and she kind of throws like a bit of a tantrum. You know, she starts, she starts having a bit of an
Well,
episode.
my particular moment is the first time she it was the Danny scene. That's where we really know she's.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you're talking about the scene we're going to talk about in like 3 seconds,
Yeah.
then yeah, because that happens right after.
Yeah.
That happens right after. There's an underlying curve that this is getting progressively worse, and then this scene happens, and it's like a powder keg exploding.
Mm.
After she has that dust up with her family, where I believe she gets mad at Danny, she treats Thorne like he's some type of servant, and and Richard confronts her about it after, and he's not picking up on her negative intentions. And then her family pretty much decides, okay, we're gonna leave. We know who she is. There's a hint. There's a hint where Richard is talking to his mother-in-law that this is kind of the way she is. We know that we need to go because it could just get worse us being here. So they kind of tip him off a little bit about what her type of mindset is.
She's possessive. Yeah.
But very possessive. And I believe this is the scene where the mother mentioned about her obsession with her father.
Yeah.
And so the family leaves, and this is when she decides that, oh, because my family's staying in Ann Arbor, I forgot how to pronounce it, which is it's an island town in Maine on an it's very nice, very picturesque. Maine's a beautiful state, and they're staying there. She's like, oh, she's trying to convince Danny to go stay there so she can be alone with Richard, someone whom she's obsessing over, and the kid's like, well, is Richard gonna come? And he says, and she says, oh no, but you can go. My family's there. You'll have a great time. It's by the water, by the beach. And he's like, oh, I'll just wait for him.
Well,
yeah.
Let me. I wanted to say this too, though. As much as obviously there is an obvious what she does in this movie is crazy. I will say that this Danny kid is kind of annoying. He won't like look, I get it. You love your brother. Maybe you're a little possessive and you need to fucking go. You're like Danny from The Room, okay? You're just always around and like,
oh my goodness.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, I mean, like there are moments where I'm like, why can't you just go? Like, obviously she wants time. Like, can't you just go and like leave him alone for a little bit? Like, you're always.
Well, I think he is also purposely done so. I think that's purposely done. He's purposely immature, and he's very gentle, very fragile. I think both physically and mentally. So I don't think he very much picks up on those types of social cues.
I'm just having fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, he is a rather almost overtly a genial character. Like he's so nice, and the way he talks and everything. He's always so gracious and loving and all that stuff. And I think it's purposely done because what happens to him is that more tragic. Essentially, what happens to him is, I don't know why they let this happen, but apparently they're letting him try swimming, even though his legs quite don't work. I mean,
I guess to build up strength in his legs,
I guess so. I think it's physically therapeutic for him, but it's done under the supervision of his brother primarily. And that was my assumption, is that it was basically he couldn't go swimming without his brother being around.
Being that she is a very good swimmer herself, I guess the brother allows it, otherwise, and they've been kind of like practicing behind his back to get, because he wants to show his brother he can swim far, and
Yeah, and one thing we haven't touched upon is that the Helen character or the Ellen character, um, she and Danny have had a relationship this whole time, like a friendly, familial relationship where she's like they're like friends, like buddies or whatever. So that they hide stuff behind the brother's back, and she lets him get away with certain things that the other adults are probably too strict about. Like a really cool relative, like a cool aunt, if you will, and and and
cool
unbeknownst
hot
to, yeah, I guess so. That's a whole other different story.
Well, he even says that in one scene where he's like, "Nobody is as beautiful as you."
Yeah. He probably, yeah. I'm assuming
He probably
there's
has
a
a
lot
little
of,
crush.
yeah. I mean, the film does propose this type of odd romantic fascination with uh, family members, if you will. She like we said had that obsession with her father. She even fell in love with the Richard character because he looked like her father. I mean, they do put that in the movie, I think, on purpose. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. What happens? But getting back to what happens, he tries to swim to the other shoreline. The day before he could make it, 3/4 of the way. Today he's gonna try for the whole thing. And there's a sequence where I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is about to happen, isn't it?" She's gonna let this boy drown, and without going into it, she lets this boy drown, and I was like, "Wow, this is a movie from 1945, and we just watched, we just watched uh, a young boy drown." I mean, they're afraid to like hurt kids in movies now and have kids die in movies now, and it's 2018. In 1945, that must have been pretty shocking.
One thing they did to I think lessen that was that they never show his body afterwards.
No, they didn't. But we
He
saw
goes
him
into the
go
water and you
down.
never see him again.
Yeah, we they do cover it up by not showing the dead body or not showing, anything when it comes to really the funeral or anything like that. They kind of gloss over that and then they move on to another sequence. But he goes down there. The scene is shot interestingly to me because there's always this still shot that I've always seen associated with this movie with Gene Tierney in that white I guess jacket, if you will, and she's wearing the glasses and she has this stone cold look on her face.
Yeah.
This is the look of a person who is not good.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the idea of them glasses too is like the soullessness of her, like they going looking into her eyes that are black.
She doesn't move. He doesn't move. He like the kid doesn't go straight down. He comes back up. He screams for help. He goes back down. He screams for help, and she just stands there with that cold, dead look on her face, like a statue.
Yeah, she's even like, Danny, you're gonna get tired, Danny.
And the monotone voice she speaks when the kid asks her, am I halfway there yet? And she's like, no, you're not.
Don't give up now, Danny. You're almost there.
Yeah. When in actuality, he's not even close.
You're not getting far, Danny. You're not making much progress, Danny.
No. It's a very chilling scene.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the scene for me, just picking it out from a filmmaking perspective, you can tell that part of it was shot on location and part of it was shot in the studio. Anything that was done in a wide shot, you could tell that was shot on location somewhere, and then all the close-up shots, you can tell that that's a rear projected screen, and they're probably swimming in a pool, in a studio.
Yeah,
I think there's even one point where the kid is swimming and he's not going anywhere because I think he's gotten to the edge of whatever container he's swimming.
That's why he wasn't making much progress.
Yeah, that's why he wasn't making much progress. He wasn't moving anywhere, but he goes. But this is the turning point of the movie. This is when the film goes from that Douglas Sirk, picturesque melodrama, romantic movie to Alfred Hitchcock. Wow, there's just a series of screwed up moments coming.
Yeah, this bitch is crazy.
Things go bad. Things go from bad to worse. So, like I said, there's no funeral scene. We basically get a flash forward to I would say a month later. Yeah, they're at the Ann Arbor Island. They move in. Richard and Ellen move in with her mom and cousin, and and he's he's distraught. I mean, he had a very close relationship with his brother. He's being very distant from Ellen, and this is the worst thing that could happen to her. Granted, I don't think she really thought any of this through. She's one of those, I guess you can say, psychopaths, or
opportunistic, you know,
who don't really think things out or don't really plan things out. They only think about the moment in which things are going to happen. They only think about how it could benefit them instantaneously and not long term.
Yeah.
Because what did you think was going to happen if Richard's brother died? You'd think he would all of a sudden become, you know, more loving, more caring, and being and kind of paying all this kind of attention to you. I think that's what she thought. But what happened is he went for the opposite. He went reversed.
Well, yeah, of course. And then there's the fact of she was the one there watching him.
Yeah,
you didn't think he was going to have any feelings on the fact that you were there and allowed my brother to die?
I trusted you to watch probably the most important person in the world to me, and you played some type of role in him dying. You were watching him and you failed your job. So that would be, you know, that would cause him to have some resentment for her, which he does. And which he probably does. He doesn't really kind of voice it, but probably in his attitude he does. So she comes up with the idea that she's going to have a baby. That's going to get him and her closer together. What bonds two people close together more than them coming together to make another human life? That's pretty concrete there. And so she decides basically to not manipulate him, but to have a baby for that purpose only. I don't think she cares about becoming a mother or anything like that. And she readily says it later on. So
she makes it known she doesn't.
She makes it known to us. I mean, the second half of this movie makes everything plain to us, while the first half of the movie is everything's a little more underneath the surface. On the second half, this is all out in the open, and it's really obvious her intentions. But what happens when she gets pregnant is, due to pregnancies, she can't leave the house. She can't be mobile really because, you know, as pregnancies go on, you know, women have more physical strain on their bodies and things like that. And she begins to hate that. And what ends up happening is she sees that Richard and her adopted sister Ruth are becoming closer and closer. You know, they're going to town together to go shopping. They're working on that book that he's working on together. He's back writing, and now that he's kind of, you know, not over his brother's death, but he's getting his life back in motion. And what happens is, I believe when she decides, Stephen, I have to go revert to you on this.
What's that?
After his book comes out, is that
that's at the end? That's at the end.
Okay.
Right, I thought it was end scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So
before they break it up. Yeah.
Before things go truly south.
Yeah.
As if they're not already down there already.
Yeah.
So she decides she doesn't want to be pregnant anymore. She hates it. There's a scene that she confesses to Ruth that she hates being pregnant. She hates the situation. She doesn't want this baby anymore. She pretty much says that. I forgot what her actual wording is, but it's pretty dark. And then so after she decides that she's going to make herself fall down the stairs to essentially lose the baby. And it's not like, and what is kind of really messed up to me is she seems rather far along in her pregnancy. This isn't early on. This is like, I'm not sure when.
I'd say it's a good 5 or 6 months in.
Yeah, she's showing, like I said, her body's feeling the physical strain of pregnancy. She's far along in it. That makes that even darker and more disturbing. And she decides she's going to put these extremely uncomfortable shoes on, pretend that her shoe gets snagged in the carpet at the top of the stairs, and basically throw herself down the stairs. It's a great tenseful sequence because you almost can't believe that this is about to happen. Similar to when Danny drowned, you're like, I can't believe this is about to happen. Yeah. She's about to do this. Yeah. And they really pull that tension string along.
I'm trying to think of the movie, but there's another movie where I'm trying to think of it, but there's been other movies where you've seen somebody decide to hurt themselves to prove that they've done that something's happened to them, or something like that. I can't think of what movie I'm thinking of, but I've seen movies where somebody's like, cut themselves in the face, or like this is like very similar to that, where it's just kind of like you're like don't want to watch. You're like, really?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Far like.
Yeah, and since it's the 1940s, they don't show her like tumbling down the stairs.
No.
There's a close up of her foot, and her foot going. She kind of kicks up the rug a little bit to create like that little crevice where you're gonna slip on, and then it shows her. It shows her her foot.
Yeah.
Her shoe comes out. Her foot is loose, and then you hear her sound of her going down the stairs and screaming, and then you see her at the bottom of the stairs, and then people rush over. And then there's a cut scene, and then the scene cuts to the aftermath, the doctor, and he basically says what we all know is going to happen is that she's lost the baby.
So she's really good at giving herself an abortion in the first tumble, because I guess it's that easy. I don't know.
I don't know, Stephen. I never tried it.
I've never tried it either.
I've never tried it, so I couldn't say how difficult or easy that is, but still a really dark and twisted thing to do to oneself in order to get out of a situation.
Kind of reminds me of a movie we talked about, not the exact same situation, of course, but when we did Gone with the Wind, where the scene with the girl losing her baby in that movie,
that was more of a tragedy, I believe.
Well, sure, but
I believe didn't the child die? No, it was a horse jumping accident.
Well, no, but the baby itself died in the down the stairs fall.
Oh, okay, yeah, I remember. Yeah, it's very similar. That was more tragic because it was an accident.
It was an accident, but they were having an argument. So.
Right. This was more purposeful and more, I would say, selfish. I would say. It's interesting. Yeah. There's a definite sense of selfishness when it comes to the character of Ellen. As much as she's trying to, as much as her focus is on someone else, her obsession is on someone else. All of the things she does is rather selfish.
It's somebody that's possessive only cares about how that person can make them feel. It's about it's not about how they can be for them. Even when they say they're trying to do it for them, really they're only in the relationship with that person because of how they make them feel.
Yes. Which is actually, she pretty much says that later on in the movie. Yeah. And going on from the sequences, I believe the next sequence is her isn't she on the beach and she's in the water and she's all happy and everything, and then I believe she comes back home and that's when she sees the book. Yes. Right? And that's when she sees the book, and then because Richard has finally finished his book, and she opens it up, and guess who it's dedicated to? Not to her, to her cousin / adopted sister Ruth, the girl with the hoe. I believe that's what it's called.
Yeah, there's a scene earlier in the movie where the cousin's working in the garden.
Yeah, the cousin apparently has a fascination with gardening, and early on the scene when they go and visit, when Ruth and the mother go visit them in Maine before Danny dies, which kind of set everything off. She's planting some stuff up there because where she lives there's not good soil to plant things. So that's another part of the Richard and Ruth relationship, where they kind of bond over things like that, and he calls her the girl with the hoe, as an affectionate nickname or something like that, and he dedicates the book to her because she actually helped him with rewrites and editing and stuff like that, and this drives Ellen completely crazy. She's already kind of cuckoo in the head, but she's even more upset about this.
And before we get to that last bit of craziness, now our main character decides he's done with her. That sends her way over the edge.
Well, she
confronts him about the book.
Yeah, Ruth confronts. No, not Ruth. Ellen confronts Ruth about the book, and he happens to be eavesdropping or standing and observing the conversation because Ruth's about to leave, and I think she's going to back to that ranch in New Mexico or something. She's moving on, and Ellen just flips out on her, basically, about her relationship with Richard and all that kind of stuff. And Richard hears this, and he begins to put these pieces together. He begins to their loving relationship has now deteriorated towards this point where they can't be together anymore. And Richard says he's going to leave her. He and that is when everything gets put out on the table. All the cards get thrown out on the table, and she confesses to um, letting Danny die. She and I believe she also confesses about the baby as well. I think everything comes out. It's a whole big fight scene where all the confessions come out, and he is mortified and he's gonna leave her. And that's is when she says that she did it all for him to be closer to him, and it was always about strengthening their relationship and all that stuff. But like we said, it's mostly been just for her. It's been very selfish acts just for her. And this is when and then after this is when she decides to concoct her final scheme, her final revenge, if you will, or her her final act. And she decides that she's going to write a letter to the Vincent Price character, who's now a DA, and who's apparently like in line to becoming like the next governor of somewhere. And she writes to him saying, "Oh, I have suspicions that my husband's going to leave me for Ruth and all this kind of stuff." And basically, it's a letter full of lies just to get him. And then she also puts in that letter that that Ruth threatened her, that Ruth is threatened to kill her, and that she fears for her life. And lo and behold, she ends up poisoning herself with arsenic. I don't know about you, Stephen. I'm not getting desperate enough to poison myself. That's a road of like pain and that I don't want to go through. That is a dark path.
This woman's crazy. Yeah.
And it's interesting because she's obviously pushed emotionally to the point of, I guess, death is better than life without what she wants. Because I guess her ultimate goal was to possess Richard entirely, and she has entirely lost him. So now her final scheme is to basically destroy his life and the life of Ruth, who she believes, has been her enemy this whole time. When there's nothing really to attest to that, we never really seen that was the case. So she decided, like I said, she poisons herself. She takes the coffee from the sugar, pours it out, and then pours in arsenic, which apparently looks very close to sugar. Maybe they should change that formula a little bit, or at least she put something that contains arsenic in where the sugar was. I think she put like some type of pesticide or some type of something like that was directly connected to Ruth, because Ruth has her fascination with gardening, so that connects her to the poisoning. And
basically, she's trying to frame her for killing.
She's trying to frame her cousin / sister Ruth, and she ends up doing so. She ends up dying. There's a scene where she's guest on her deathbed, and she tells Richard, have me cremated, scatter my ashes where my father's is, because that's what she wanted. And there was a whole scene earlier on in this movie, which seems like a lifetime ago, where when they first met and she's scattering the ashes of her father, like Stephen said, where she said that, I had this pact with my father, if he died first, I'd scatter his ashes here. If I died first, he would scatter my ashes here. So, and you think it's a genuine scene of like, heartache and death. No, it's just more manipulation, more ways to screw with the Richard character, because apparently in her final will and testament, she wrote explicitly that she wanted her body to be buried in like the family crypt or something like that. So she's screwing him over one more time.
Yeah, just to seem like that they killed her on purpose and wanted to get rid of the evidence.
Yes, wanted to get rid of the evidence. So, and the final moments of this movie, I guess you could say the last part of the third act, is a courtroom drama where the Vincent Price character comes back. He's prosecuting both the sister, Ruth, and Richard. And what ends up happening is Ruth gets off. She's not convicted, but Richard ends up going to prison for 2 years because he admits during the trial that he was aware that Ellen was responsible for Danny's death. So apparently it was a whole thing where it was like preserving information against a case or whatnot. It's a technical thing.
I guess aiding and abetting technically.
Yeah, it was kind of like aiding and abetting by not telling that information.
I think you're trying to say withholding evidence.
Withholding evidence. What am I saying? Withholding evidence. And what is interesting is that the movie starts off actually at the end, which we didn't mention.
Yeah.
He's going back to, I believe,
the island.
The island. Yeah. I don't know if it's Ann Arbor or if it's the
Maine home.
Or if it's that country home in Maine, which is called, I can't remember what it's called. There was a specific name for it. Not like it was like the back lot or something. I forgot what it's called.
It probably is on the back lot.
It probably is. Yeah, it's like, anywho, it's basically the summer home in Maine, and the film ends with them finally together, if you will, after all of this grief and strife that's happened. What we also learned during the trial is that Ruth has basically loved Richard this whole time anyway. Like that was kind of something that was revealed as well, which is not something that was really obviously evident throughout the film, but I think we could have come to that conclusion looking back on it.
Yeah, I mean, if there was one thing I would say negative, is that I felt that bit of stuff was a little bit tacked on. I didn't know that it was necessary in the story, that we needed this, like, other love interest. I mean, there could have been like a bond without there being a love interest per se.
Yeah, that seems extremely Hollywood.
It is.
Granted, I mean, the movie is based on a book of the same name. I'm not familiar with the book. The book could be, could have ended like that. That could have been something in the book. The relationship between the Richard and Ruth character could have been built up more in the book, for all I know. I mean, there are quite a few scenes with them in the movie, but it never quite gets to a point where I feel like it's romantic.
Yeah.
It always feels like they are just great friends.
I think they didn't want to do that in the movie so that you didn't feel like he was ever cheating on her.
Yeah, that's another thing where the film is entirely one-sided towards the Ellen character being evil.
Yeah.
And the Richard character being a victim.
Yeah.
Where you could look at it as, he's not the perfect person. I mean, there are definitely things he could have done to prevent a lot of the instances that happened in the movie. I think particularly, like we mentioned, the death of his brother. I think while it is entirely on the Ellen character, who, she's directly responsible for it, I mean, he could have seen certain signs within the Ellen character to not leave his brother alone with her. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. he could have been more aware of what the problems were with her, because I think they were more obvious than not.
I mean, first of all, his first flaw, I would say about him, is that he easily marries people.
Yeah, that's one thing. Don't marry somebody you meet in a week. That's one thing.
This is like the anti-romantic comedy movie.
Yeah, there's no happily ever after.
Which getting into its essentialness, first thing I started thinking of after seeing this movie was like, well, this influenced the Basic Instincts, or a lot of them sex movies of the 80s took this route where there's the crazy girl or the crazy guy that won't let things go in a relationship, and it goes beyond the normal melodrama. It goes to a physical threat, whether it's Basic Instinct or
Fatal Attraction,
Fatal Attraction, stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, I was reading a review. Someone mentioned Gone Girl from a few years ago with Rosamund Pike and Ben Affleck, which was also based on a book as well, about a lot of manipulation and a very toxic relationship or marriage.
Shades movies?
Could be. They are rather manipulative. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it definitely the movie definitely had a big influence on culture. Without it probably even, I mean, it took maybe a couple decades before it sunk in, but like I said, the '80s started really delving into that subject matter a lot, and yeah, it's a really good movie.
It's a really great film, and we talked about this very briefly beforehand. And Steve and I have a little bit of a differing opinion on this because it is classified as a film noir, as a Technicolor film noir, which is an odd thing to wrap your mind around. I think it's a film noir because of its dark elements and because I think the Gene Tierney character is one of the fiercest, most ice cold of all the femme fatales.
I mean, I definitely, I'm. The more I think about it, the more I agree with you. I mean, definitely thematically, it fits a film noir where it's about obsession, which is a big key thing in a film noir. I would just say I would say it's a non-traditional, like we said, non-traditional film noir. It's not black and white. It doesn't really have a detective, like a investigation element to it, like a lot of film noirs, but it does have the themes of a film noir and somewhat of a structure that feels like it could be film noir. So I guess I give it that. It's just to me, it doesn't scream film noir. It's more of a definitely an alternative film noir.
Yeah, like I said, it feels more like a a Douglas Sirk melodrama mixed with an Alfred Hitchcock film. That's kind of the two elements I see in this movie. And like Steven said, it's definitely essential and influential. I mean, this is a movie from 1945 that's dealing with a lot of dark themes, like we said, obsession. There's this whole thing throughout cinema where several movies touch on this, Vertigo and all kinds of movies, that this obsessive love and how self-destructive it is, and how we think of love as being this all good thing, like I love you, you love me, we're happy, we're everything is good. But there's this thing, if you take love too far, where if you take anything too far, it can have the complete opposite effect, or have the complete opposite meaning. And this film really shows how love can be that way. And what is interesting is that this obsessive love, or I think just this love in general, seems one way in this movie. Never in the movie that I ever quite feel that the Richard character loved um the Ellen character as much as she did. And there's a whole sequence. Yeah, go on.
I was gonna say, I think he thought she was definitely intriguing, but it never got to the point where he could really ever get to really know her, because it happened so fast.
Yeah, it was another thing. Yeah, there was a whole line of questioning where the Vincent Price character is um basically just badgering him question after question, like, did you love your wife, that month, this month, that, what, at what point did you stop loving her, at what, and he's like saying, my affection for her changed over time, specifically after both Danny's death and the death of the unborn baby. I think that would naturally change one's affection towards someone in any situation, whether it was actually accidental, or or whether both incidences were accidental or were on purpose. I think relationships are going to change because of those events, no matter what.
Yeah, definitely, and it's this bitch was crazy.
This movie
that's my final words on this.
Yeah, but I'll say this: it's a movie that I was surprised by, and I really loved a lot. Definitely essential. I would also say it's a little difficult to find if you're trying to watch it for the first time. It is available on DVD. There is a Blu-ray, but like I was telling Steven earlier, it is out of print, so it's rather expensive to get. Hopefully, it'll be re-released soon. As when it comes to streaming, it's a really tough film to find streaming anywhere. Even for places like Filmstruck or TCM, you can only really catch them when they have it available. But I definitely highly recommend checking it out any way you can, because it's a great film. So, without further ado, Stephen, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on YouTube, Cinema Discovery Project. You got me on Facebook, Stephen Billings, Instagram, all that jazz.
Yeah, you can find me also on Twitter at Capzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Capzilla Productions. And you can find all of these videos here on our friend Dan Skip Allen's YouTube channel, Best Damn Movie Show. And we are getting towards the end of our run. We are in the single digits now. It is a race to the finish, and these will be wrapping up rather soon.
I think we got 3 more we have to video, and then we'll be technically done. But we still have some others that we've videoed that we haven't released yet. So
yes, we are. That was a little behind the scenes movie magic that you don't get to see very often. So, um,
yeah,
yeah, that's about it from us. You keep watching those movies.
I know I will.